if you had to summarize, let's say, the top 3 leadership qualities that you yourself bring to the table, that you are consciously aware of, what do you think they might be? I know this one's a little bit of a tangent topic, but just wanted to put it out there because there was so many in that story.
Yeah, no, that's easy for there's tons of them. So like some of the main ones for me is if you want to be a good leader, and you want to stay someone that people can look up to, and you want to take sort of an audience with you or take your clients with you, you have to understand balance between the polarities of the world and the dualities of the world. If you don't understand, if you are sort of a charged cat, you sort of get certain things can happen and you get charged, or something happens on this side, you're like, oh man, Trump, I see this, or COVID, or I see this, or I'm going to use examples which are charging the world right now. So if you're charged by something very easily, you got to find out what is the charge within yourself that is causing you to go, I don't like that. Because at the end of the day, if you understand some of the things about leadership, right? Certain leaders, for example, whether you like or hate Trump or Biden or whoever's leading the world right now, in any country, by the way, even here with who's leading, you will like some parts of Trump, but you might not admit it if you feel at that present time there's hate on that leader. But you might go, that part I like, but you can't say it now. But then you might find all these things that you hate as well, right? And so if you're going to lead, you got to go, how can I see the positive and negatives on both sides as I assess someone, rather than being unconscious of one side. So that's one of the main things. And I can go really deep into that if you want to talk about how you ascend what I call the newer spheres, NOO spheres, which is your spheres of influence. So leadership, second part would be the circle of influence, as they call it, is spheres of influence, right? And newer spheres. And when I came across this teaching, I was like, man, I wish I knew this a long time ago. So this is from, and I'll tell you where the credit comes from. It's a guy that I've trained with. He's a mentor of mine, it's Dr. John DeMartini. But the way the mind works, as you ascend the consciousness levels and start to understand things in life, which then relates back to this balance, is there are certain newer spheres that you ascend. Now, on the bottom, it's sort of the animalistic nature, and on the top, it's the angelic nature. And on the top, it's also what we would call purpose, we would call soul's drive. You're finding that thing that you would do for free. Down here, you're basically driven by the senses. You're feeding, and I don't know if are you allowed to swear on this or not, but so
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so they could, and I'm not swearing in that sense, but in the context of it, it's like if you're animalistic, you're just looking at feeding and fucking and nothing else.
Yeah.
But when you go up, you're looking at, what am I needing to fulfill in this life and go on that level, like my purpose, right? So you ascend the newer spheres, and as you ascend, if you're not able to put it this way, if one person can charge you up, then you're only going to stay at that level, meaning you only get one fan and one hater. If you can deal with 10 haters, then you'll also have 10 fans. So the analogy that John DeMartini talked to me about when I first found out about this was like, as you ascend the newer spheres, your job is to understand that if you feel like you have 100 haters because maybe you start a new podcast or you start a new business or whatever it is, but you feel like I only got one person supporting me, I got all this hate, man, I'm gonna have to stop or give up. It's just because you're not unconscious fully of all the positives. You need to kind of balance it out because they are there. And he's like, it's called a blowjob analogy. So I don't know if you guys have heard this, but
oh, this is a first for me.
Yeah. So if you the way it works is if you have say you work in an office, so let's just paint the picture, right? You work in an office and you're the factory worker, right? You're not the CEO, you're not the boss manager, you're just a factory worker. If you go get a sneaky blowjob by someone else in the office, so you meet this chick and you have a blowjob, then the circle of influence that might know about it is just people on the factory floor, 1, 2, 3 people. If you're the manager and you go and do that and the company finds out, then it might be 10, 20, 30 people that start to talk about it. And they'll talk about it for about 2-3 months versus just one day to a week. If you're the CEO of, say, I don't know, Cisco or Microsoft, and you go and do that, then that might be spoken about for like 6 months and like thousands of people will know about it, right? And then if you're the president, so you got your Trump or your Clinton, and he, as you know, he's had his situation, people will talk about that for maybe up to 100 years because at the level that he's playing at on the spheres of influence, he has a sphere of influence where it's millions of people see what he's doing, right? So he would have 1 million fans, but 1 million haters. And if he can't handle 1 million haters, well, he can't say he needs the 1 million fans. That's just how it works. So the way you rise up in leadership is understanding the balance, because if you understand the balance, you'll be able to take all that hate that keeps coming. Because if you go, oh my goodness, I can handle 5 haters, But as soon as my mum joined the hate, or as soon as my cousin joined my hate, or as soon as my high school friend joined that, so it might be like, oh, some of my primary school friends are hating on me, but I got all this support from, you know, my networking events and all this sort of stuff. But then there might be this one person that in your mind, you didn't realize on an unconscious level had quite a big play on you. It might be like your best mate from high school. It might be a certain cousin that you're close to, or it might be like an uncle or aunt, or it might be mom or dad. And they'd say something like, hey, dude, like, I don't think I condone this, whatever action you're taking. That, if that's the spark and they happen to be the 25th person on your hate list, it means you'll only ever able to grow up to 25 positive fans. And that's your sphere of influence. Okay. So it's about ascending the noospheres and finding out how can I, you know, not be so charged and understand. And the way to do that is not get worked up by the polarities of the world, because you have to understand at the end of the day, whatever the polarities, and you guys can throw some at me and I'll maybe talk to you about what the positive and negatives are. But one of the things I do with the clients is if they're charged on something, we balance the emotional content in the mind, and then we go from there on a new sort of future. Because everything that you do now is based on a set of memories that you have on your timeline, right? The future imaginations that you can have. If I said to you, look, tell me what tomorrow's breakfast is going to look like, and then you had to think about it, and you don't have to tell me like here, but you can just have a like mental image. Oh yeah, kind of, what would it be for the next 7 days, like your breakfast? And then if I go, you know, what would dinner be for the next 7 days? In your mind, you might have some sort of idea of what it could be, right? But you'll find that it's very similar to what was the last 7 days breakfast and the last 7 days dinners. I can guarantee with you, you wouldn't say that, you know, in next week, same time, my dinner's going to be with, you know, Michael Jordan. It's not going to be something so different. It's going to be something that I can bet on that. Like I can bet it's very similar to the past. So in that sense, you have to understand like everything that's happening from your past is kind of dictating how far you see potential and possibility in the future. The only thing that does change that future dinner or that future breakfast to be something completely different is if you do something in the now, which is the present time. So in the present time is all the power you have. So in the present time, if something's charging you, you're limiting yourself in that moment based on whatever could happen in the future. If in the present time you get something that's going to move you and you go, why am I feeling this? Quickly try and find out, okay, if it's a negative thing, well, what are the positives? If it's something that's super positive and you go, wow, I've got this opportunity, guy's come up to me, he's got a new contract, wants me to joint venture with him, looks like I'm a mate, extra 50 grand came out of nowhere, like where's this deal coming from? That's when you pause and you go, future looks crazy, but it's not like what's been happening. What's the downside? Am I missing something on the contract? Am I missing some hidden benefit that they get that I'm not seeing? Do you know what I mean? So I've used this a lot. It was one of the things I used when I was, you know, invited to join a mentoring training group, like we discussed, you know, in previous conversations, like come and join, help us grow. But I kind of saw some negatives in doing that. So it's like, I pull away from the decision. So there's things like that where if you're not able to balance though, you just jump because it's pretty cool. It's like, hey man, big brand, let's go for it, you know? So yeah, that's one of the other things on leadership. And then the last thing is I think you need to do your own self-growth. You need to look, if you're asking me for 3 things, the third one would be whatever you want to lead people in, you need to be an expert in that field, meaning you have to invest your own time in that knowledge, you know? And I refer to a section of our podcast last week that I had down with Rashan. It's like, I like to also there's an aspect of me that likes to learn from people that have done the shit, you know, not from someone who talks about it.
Yeah.
So in this respect, specifically, like if I want to, like when I wanted to move from real estate, and as I mentioned, I was helping a lot of people outside of like, this is how you do a contract. This is how you sell a house, right? That was easy for me. That became like water, but how to help their mind deal with the negatives, like a buyer's buying, it's $10 million or $5 million. And all of a sudden they turn away and they've already set like, oh, I'm going to get 50 grand in commissions over the next 3 months. Taken away, those guys sometimes don't recover because they already sort of played a fantasy out of what was going to happen. So I was finding that a lot of my help ended up being helping people balance what was going on and understand, training their mind more than the logical, technical real estate side of things. So in leadership now, it's like, okay, if I'm going to go into a business where I want to go and help people see the potential and benefits in themselves, and whilst I've been able to do it in one specific industry, before I go and make this a full-scale thing, I'm going to go and invest in myself. And that's where we've met in past events and courses, learning. And I'm not talking cheap shit, you know, I mean, we're talking like I spent big money, and, you know, we know the levels we've spent on certain things. It's like, I spent big money every year from about 2015 onwards, finding out, okay, now that I know the game of real estate and mindset, how can I learn about NLP? How can I learn about social leadership? How can I learn about technical? How can I learn about digital marketing? How can I learn about all these different pillars that form me being one of the best sort of avenues for someone to go, hey, I need help and I can help them, rather than I can help them, I always can. And so I don't feel bad about it, but I'm still limited. I was like, how can I make sure that no matter what they come to me with, I do have some resources I can pull onto. If it's not my resource, I have met someone within a field that can help, and I know them, I've built a relationship with them. And that only happens because, again, if you go up on the newer spheres and you can deal with hate and you can deal with all the praise, you start to meet many more people. You start to meet, if you can deal with more hate, I'll tell you can meet much more bigger people, because the bigger people are dealing with huge amounts of hate. You never get access to them because you stop at a certain point of hate. And so it's like, that's why you never meet that contact. So for me, it's like, how fast can I get hate? It's what Grant Cardone says, right? Go get more haters. Like, I fully understand that. Go get the haters, because if you're getting the haters, you're definitely getting some growth. You're definitely being pushed to outside your comfort zone. And when people see that, these people will just appear out of nowhere. They'll just come up, be like, hey, I like what you're doing. And I've never met them. Some of these guys come up on my Instagram, they message me. I'm like, I didn't know you'll follow me for X amount of time, but sometimes I'll do something where it is polarizing, or I'll say something that is sort of off field and people are like, ooh, he went there. Because I think I posted something, I'll sidetrack. I posted something with Trump, Ellen DeGeneres, some of the topics that were really sort of out. People were like not there, and I had like that story had so many replies. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because I didn't take a side, but I brought up something that is so triggering to people, just to spark conversation. And when I spark conversation, obviously my response was all about balance, and people haven't seen that explanation. It's normally like, man, you know about it too. Where do you stand? And it's like, hey, let's not talk about where we stand. Let's talk about, why do you think there is a stand? Why do you think there must be an X and a Y? So that sort of things is like,
I think that's exactly what that part is, because you need to be able to stand in front of everyone. Doesn't matter how big that crowd is. Stand up for, this is where I stand. This is what I believe in. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to talk about it, whether you're a hater or whether you're a lover. It actually doesn't matter. Yeah. But you can stand your ground and lead that pack, whoever that might be. So even starting those conversations when no one else is willing to do so, this is something Shiv and I spoke about, I think, when we released the racism episode, and actually, I think it's featured on the Shiv Show. So that was exactly that, because we had such polarizing different responses. Some people were backing us up, and this is something that was spot on. And I think you had much more conversations happening. Do you remember some of the things that happened? Because it's very similar to what's happening here.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of racism, I'll pluck one out of the air, like from say it's an, I won't name names, but I had a conversation with someone. It was like, initially the conversation was, this is so bad, people of color need to have paybacks, and Trump is evil, and this person was of color, so same as dark like me, right? Well, we're not white, so whether you're brown, Sri Lankan, African, Trinidad, African American, whatever you are, but they were not white as such, or white privilege as such. They could say it to some aspect. There was a level of discrimination. Now the thing is, if you're only looking at that, especially if it's from generations ago, which a lot of it would have been, they're now living a very normal, healthy, privileged life where they, if, like, for example, this person is in Australia getting the benefits of the government, you wouldn't get that in certain other, like in America, you wouldn't get that, for example. So they were getting a lot of benefits, but the anger was, well, my forefathers or two generations up had this, and so I'm behind, and so I'm behind, and so I need to get it out on someone else. And the thing is, it's like, I want a forced view of where you stand. You need to tell me, like, you stand for, BLM, or you stand for X, for this. Otherwise, you're a racist, right? But by doing that, they become a racist in a mirror. Because what actually happens, if you think about it, that's what the white supremacists would have done during the KKK times. It's like, and there would be a white guy that goes, I don't want to have slaves, or I don't want to kill them, and I don't want to hang them or whatever. But he lives in an area where that became like, if you don't stand for us and go and like get these guys to where they need to be, like on the bottom, and we're going to put them down, then you're also going to be part of them. So then then he joins the majority group, right? But realistically, in his mind, he didn't really have that specific view. So they're just taking sides based on the perceived, again, it's the perceived agreement socially at the time. But many times you'll find that it changes once certain information comes to light. So there's a few, there's a bits of information that's come up after George Floyd's thing, like different body cameras, and a whole bunch of people that were citing it were now against it. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. At the end of the day, it's like, when certain pieces of information come up, your opinion changes. But if you get charged at the first sight of information and then go down a tangent, what ends up happening is you're showing the world where you stand on something. And if you force people to take your view, by default, you're becoming the enforcer or the person that is forcing someone to have a view that matches you, which is what the whole thing was 150 years ago. So they changed their view. End up what happening is like a person of color who I know has told me, wow, I actually see the blessings of Trump. Actually, people don't understand what he is actually doing. So they would say stuff like, first it was like, can't even hear the word Trump, versus I still disagree with him saying, for example, grab woman by the pussy. What a dumb thing to say. Hey man, we all agree. We all agree with that. No one's saying that if Trump's doing some good stuff that we agree with every part of him, because if we look at each other, the way I talk to like clients is like, hey, we all have black parts in us. And we all have white parts in us. If you're not willing to admit that you have done some dumb shit, said some stupid things, and especially guys, like, man, I've been a teenager. There's no way I'd say like during my teenage years and when I went to clubs and nightclubs and I saw hot chicks or whatever, I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm a saint. I'm not going to say anything dirty. We've all been there, right? So Trump, the problem is people go, oh, he's president, so he cannot say that. Yes, we agree. He's got to hold a position. But the thing is it a human trait that is possible? 100%. So if you look at him as a human and you're also a human, then by default you can understand it's not like he's gone into a supreme crazy sort of thing that's unheard of. He's just done a human trait which was not supposed to be recorded. I think it was in some caravan or some bus somewhere. It wasn't like he went out there and goes, I want people to know I'm allowed to say this because I'm the president. So stuff. It was something that was taken from a private conversation. How, no one's going to allow someone to have private conversations recorded of them through their 24/7. So what ends up happening is these guys said, yeah, well, you know what? The human side of me says that I could have also said something. And I know I've also said something which a lot of people, even my current circle and my family would go, mate, you said that? Hey, Moses, I didn't know you thought that. But they didn't hear it. That's the only difference. So here it's like you hear it, so you act on it. So then it was like, okay, now I don't have the hate anymore. I'm kind of balanced. I do disagree with him saying that because, hey, we'd like our, president of our country to actually show some sort of dignity and not speak that way. But at the same time, I can see that there were so many women that knew he said that still said they support him because they were not looking at the one moment of him saying something which most men could say when they know they're not being recorded. But he's doing so many things for women in business, for example, because they're looking at that positive. So they're balancing the equation versus let's take that thing that charges up people and we get something to talk about. And now we can all just be charged and talk about this thing. And there's no result, right? So
it's just like jumping on a bandwagon. Sorry, I'll interject quickly. I've been super quiet, and it's everyone knows me for talking so much. But when really good things are being said, I like to shut up and listen. And listen, man, you've dropped some really amazing knowledge on us today. So this has been amazing. I will say this though, as Rashan mentioned, when we talked about the racism side of things, and talking about bold subjects is always a good thing, right? And you're right. I had people messaging me saying, whose side are you on? You're a colored guy. This and that. I am the first to say that I've made many racist comments back in the day when I was younger, right? I've made many stupid comments. I've said so many stupid things. But now that you're older and you've done your research and you grow up and you mature, you realize the stuff that you've done and said wrong. Absolutely. 100%. And I think when we started getting these messages from people, we started realizing that actually, if you're a colored person and you're absolutely against white people, you're also a racist, and you should not be fighting racism with racism. And my biggest point, and I actually spoke about this at work and to multiple different teams, is do not fight racism with more racism, because you're not beating anything. You're actually making it worse, and you're creating this sort of culture. So listen, man, I love what you're saying for sure.
I guess just to close on that racism thing, in essence, the subject closes very simply like this. If you think racism is a problem and you go, we need to end racism, which is what the whole topic currently over the last month has been, or 2 months has been, to get the opposite of racism, what would that kind of be? And the way you think about it is like, okay, opposite would be world peace, right? Peace, everyone loves everybody. The only way to get the extreme of that would be one person eliminates everyone else and you got one guy. Now you got world peace. But that's called the extreme of world peace.
True. Wow.
Now the extreme of racism is you're going to get what we would have seen with George Floyd. You know, like we look at that, it's not about arguing, hey, you know, maybe he deserved it, maybe he was on a drug, he was not, you know. This is where the charged cats people come up and like, man, how dare you say, you know, it doesn't matter if he fought the cop or he swore at the cop or if he resisted arrest, you don't put a knee on him. We agree on that. It's not about that though. The point is, on the extreme, you got one person on the planet, extreme world peace. On this side, you got, that's the worst, but you don't take the worst to paint a picture on all of that type of person. You see what I mean? So it's like, okay, if you start to then allow yourself, your consciousness to go, I get that. Let's not talk about the guys that side with the neck, the guys that side with he was on some drug. Let's go past that. We can't have world peace anyway, because there's no such thing unless you eliminate the end. Someone tried that. We already know about him, you know? So Hitler, right? It doesn't work. You can't go to the extreme. But the thing is, if you want to allow yourself to be worked up, let me tell you how that works. It's going to affect you in your personal circle, meaning your job, your family, your work. Because if you're charged on something which you can actually bring to world peace, by the way, because we know that one person on the planet's impossible, so you're already chasing some fantasy, then your whole world is deteriorating, right? And now you got to go, well, where am I going with this? Do you know what I mean? So we'll close on that. We can do a whole separate show on this.
Absolutely. I think we should.